When living beings first wanted to travel from one place to another, they moved in water. It was there where life was generated and where the first locomotion systems appeared. We could think water is an anti-natural and alien space for man. However, our first 9 months of life are spent submerged. This is the reason why large water masses fascinate and attract human beings so much that we can't keep from returning to them. Although this time, equipped with designs and techniques learned from those who know the liquid element better, from those that are born, live, and die in it. Marine fauna have only 2 possibilities to travel: to be carried away at the whim of ocean currents, or to swim in their freely chosen direction. The ancestral jellyfish is not a swimming champion. It takes advantage of underwater currents in its wandering, and its primeval contractions let them change their direction, upwards or downwards, to find nourishment. Some jellyfish have reached a wonderful association with colonies of microalgae that live within their tissues. When the jellyfish turns over, the algae receive the sunlight and turn the sun's energy into nourishment for its partner, its vessel. In fact, the animal transports the plant in exchange for food. Members of the plant kingdom can't move by themselves, so they must resort to hired transportation. They have populated the whole world in this way, both underwater and on land. In fact, sometimes it's animals, the wind, or the sea that have helped plant seeds to cover every bit of land, even the smallest island. The biggest difficulty was probably crossing the ocean. The seeds of coconut palms hold the world record for long-distance sailing, although without any specific direction. Coconuts never know where they will arrive. A coconut never sinks. It's not as dense as water, and its spherical shape displaces a large volume of water. Besides, air is locked inside the coconut. In reality, it's a raft with watertight compartments. There's no doubt that after watching a coconut float, humans got many ideas of how and with what materials to make a boat to sail the sea. Coconuts even have their own keels for forward progress, but they don't have our propelling devices. Floating coconuts don't use energy, and their wood and fiber materials are long-lasting. Wandering like nomads, they may be at sea for years before arriving on dry land. Other plants have imitated the coconut's floating technique for other purposes. They found a permanent home on the water. Floating vegetation lives on a few square meters stolen from the river and has created an ecological system that is stable enough, although it does shift around a bit. Aquatic plants float because they are not as dense as water. but some of them have incorporated inner air bubbles as a safety device in case of turbulence. The best adapted plants have large air chambers to avoid sinking. This species' visible buoys turn it into an unsinkable platform. Locked in air means buoyancy. Despite being born in water, many amphibious species do not manage well in an aquatic environment. Toads, in fact, live much longer on dry land than in their temporary breeding pools. Their legs and their movements have adjusted to walking. They dive into water so rarely that when they have to cross a spring or a pond, they must resort to childish techniques so they don't sink too much when swimming. In water, they're not ashamed to use their self-inflatable floater. Although it's disguised between their legs, this air chamber is a good safety device and they don't drown. Their life buoy lets them rest and catch their breath until they're strong enough to continue crossing such a large barrier. Their hind legs have webbed feet, and they remember the technique they used when they were tadpoles, although the adult weighs a lot more. Swimming on the surface with air-filled floats is much easier, and it's a good resort for those individuals that can't or don't want to run any risks over long distances. Floating is only the first step to conquering liquid surfaces. The ability to walk on the water without getting wet is a much more complex achievement. Water striders do walk on water, literally. Such a feat is possible thanks to their size and also to their mastery of physics. Their success and their unsinkability are based on their taking advantage of the surface tension of water molecules. The surface of water, especially when it's calm, resists being entered, just like any solid body. It puts up less resistance, but it does resist. Those who have plunged into a swimming pool without thinking know that well. The water strider takes advantage of the same principles to stand on water. They live on calm waters, and their legs are covered with fine hairs that enable them to glide on their environment without penetrating the wet surface. They create a little liquid hollow and are able to stand up without sinking, waiting for their prey or mate. Water skiing is the closest that man has got to walking on water. We use the same principle as the water striders, but we have to enlarge our support surface. But due to our body density, we have to maintain a certain speed as well. Otherwise, we would sink. Flamingos move from land to water, but they don't submerge either. They profit from whatever they steal from the rivers, lakes, or seas where they reside, but they only get their heads and the tips of their feet wet. Actually, they don't like water much. They prefer to keep their distance on their endless legs. They walk as if holding up their skirts so that none of their feathers get wet while on the watch for a thick algae and crustacean soup. They're not ready to get wet for a meal, but they must at least make the food come to meet them. It may seem a forward movement or a dance, but the flamingo's tapping is their peculiar way to stir the pond bottom and to reach and filter their nourishment. From bottom to bill, in a never-ending dance. Surprisingly, this elegant and advantageous feeding system is copied very profitably by fishermen that share their habitat with pink flamingos. In southern Spain, traditional shell fishermen walk up and down the beaches, repeating the flamingo's dance. With their feet, they force the mollusks buried in the sand to leave their hiding places and end up in the filtering net. It's exhausting work that demands great physical effort. But at least when the day is done, the good dancers know that their art will feed them another day. If certain birds developed long legs to keep their feathers from getting wet, other birds, on the other hand, learned diving techniques to profit from the aquatic element as if it were a huge pantry. A bit of body oil as a raincoat, some protective membranes on the eyes, the capacity to hold their breath, and special feet, and the objective is met. Birds can swim underwater. Perhaps what most fascinated us about this evolution was the wonderful tool that ducks around the world use when they swim: paddles. Duck feet have turned into paddles, and they look like the oars humans make to propel our small boats. Maybe it was obvious that to progress through water you have to propel yourself in the opposite direction. Or it may be just a coincidence, the evolutionary merging of ideas. In nature, there are many cases in which different species have reached the same solution when facing the same problem. In fact, the path followed by aquatic birds till they reach the paddle has been followed by most terrestrial species that return to water. It was a turning back to life's origins. This journey of changes starts when you lose your fear of swimming. The best thing is to begin with shallow places. But if the journey goes into the deep spots, the most daring individuals, if they survive, will have crossed the line that turned them quickly or slowly into a new species. Sometimes spontaneous morphological variations appear that make it possible to discover alternate worlds. When this happens, it's possible to explore and reach new resources, new virgin spaces for the new order. The search for food and ecological systems providing other expanding possibilities took these zoological classes to water or to the sea. This colonization was carried out by arthropods, reptiles, and mammals, and all of them had to reshape their bodies to make them more hydrodynamic. Sea turtles have more streamlined shells than their ancestors, and their legs have turned into true flippers. Those features that meant more hydrodynamic movement were selected and incorporated into the genetic plan. The reinvasion of the planet's blue areas was so perfect that many species forgot their past, while some others only step on land to perform certain duties. The movements of sea lions on land show that their links with the dry places where they are born are decreasing more and more. The modified structure of their extremities only works in the sea. On land, their flippers are not very comfortable, but in water, they are like wings, and they can fly in 3 dimensions. Conquering the ocean demanded other adjustments besides a hydrodynamic profile and the propulsion conferred by flippers. Hot-blooded beings needed to stop the heat loss they suffered whenever they entered the liquid element. A thick layer of fat insulates them from their environment. Pinnipeds and cetaceans are the most overweight beings in the seas, although fat floats in water. Watching these animals that are so well equipped for aquatic living, that enjoy and play with the waves, the spectator may want to get into the water too. Why not? Let's copy their methods and get some flippers. Would man-made flippers propel us? The answer to these old questions is yes and no. Yes, flippers will propel us in some surprising ways. And yes, we can insulate our bodies with thick diving suits. But we are light years away from their turns and somersaults, from their amazing ability to navigate independently from one sea to another. One thing is man's invention, and another, even more perfect thing, is natural evolution. Nonetheless, man, driven by our hunger for knowledge, is looking into a world that was totally unknown until recently. Our gear and techniques are born from our observation of underwater life and from our dream to become dolphins. But our visits to the underwater world are reduced to brief periods. The lack of air will soon force us to set our feet back on dry ground. If we can stay underwater for even brief periods, it's because we have copied another thing from our diving masters. This insect can be considered the inventor of scuba tanks. Over 5 centimeters long, the water tiger beetle catches its prey underwater. Its technique is not a quick one. It's a stalker. While it's waiting, it needs to breathe, but it doesn't want to emerge often. Its watch demands concentration and calm, so its prey do not discover its presence. To reduce the number of interruptions, it has designed an air chamber that helps prolonging its wait. When it has to emerge to breathe, it refills its deposit hidden along its elytrons between its wings. Sometimes some bubbles escape from its tank, but its specific oxygen tank performs perfectly the job it was designed for: to store and ration out the precious air to extend the period the animal may stay underwater. The water beetle has solved the same breathing problem we share. Stored air is always in short supply, so the best solution is to have a straight line setting the most efficient way to ascend or descend without losing your bearings. Man was not the first to find this solution. A slimy safety line keeps these mollusks from getting lost in their green labyrinths. A straight line is the shortest path from food to air, and these snails must constantly ascend to the surface to breathe. The only animals that do not have problems with their oxygen supply are those animals that have evolved in ways faithful to their birthplaces. There's no doubt that fish have the most perfect fins, the most hydrodynamic shapes and skins, the least resistant movements to glide through water. They're the models we copied most often when designing ships or submarines, keels, stabilizers, or rudders. In the sea, there are almost 20,000 species of fish, 20,000 ways to move through more than 20,000 leagues of underwater travels. Most of them have a common feature: a chamber that can inflate or deflate with gas to attain more or less pressure, to stabilize the fish at the desired depth with no ballast. The air bladder allows for inimitable tri-dimensional spatial control, and you don't have to flap your fins all the time. The only exceptions lacking this organ are the primitive cartilaginous fish, and they have to keep swimming continuously till the end of their days. Otherwise, they're not able to control the depth of their immersion. The most modern diving equipment includes a vest connected to the air tank that acts as a huge swimming bladder. Our technology allows us the feeling of being one among many fish. In the oceans, many other living beings move before our eyes almost unnamed. The variety and specialization needed in this disturbing world could supply us with an infinite number of movements to conquer it and to care for it. The octopus's amazing jet propulsion is just a sample of how each species has adapted their genetic design to the sea or to fresh water. But sailing the seas or arriving at a new coast is not always the exclusive responsibility of chromosomes. Sometimes fate plays a determining role in dispersing life forms. The coconut goes north or south according to chance, and it was never in a hurry. If it's the first to arrive on a lifeless beach, it's ready for it. It's a colonizer. Its white reserves can feed it until its roots find nourishment down there. Then it will wait until new waves of animals or plants come and settle nearby, thanks to the coconut's presence. And a coconut can also be a vessel for other little stowaways. Life manages very well to extend itself all over the planet in really surprising manners. And it is we, human beings, the most cosmopolitan of all beings, who will be the second wave.